Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Elohim. I am the owner of Insight Transformations, and I do energy healing and I channel messages for the collective. This week's collective reading is a beginning of a series. I channel Temperance, who is a judge in the spiritual courts, and she has said it is time to tell this story, so let's go. This week is entitled Creation and the Elohim, Part 1. There are many creation stories, each a framework used to understand the world and one's place in it. All are at least partly allegorical. Human brains function best on storytelling, parables, and symbols. This week I will begin a story of creation that is symbolic at best and theoretical at worst, giving a framework for an understanding of the world of manifestation. What follows is a mathematical formula written in poetry. In the beginning was the source of all. Source was formless, intangible, an endless ocean of potential. Within this intangibility grew the tangible desire to experience, and from this desire grew possibilities which sprung into manifestation. There was no time, no space. No one thought to ask how quickly or slowly it happened. Over the course of experience, time and space came into existence in myriad forms, as there was now something to measure by these systems. All was created in joy. Beauty and ugliness were created, goodness and evil, light and dark. These combined in every possible way as being came out of non-being source. Groups of beings drew together, creating more of themselves to share in the joy of creation. One group organized themselves into a loving family. We call them the Elohim, creators with godlike abilities and a desire to explore manifestation. These beings numbered in the hundreds, and each possessed a unique blend of energies that gave them joy and curiosity. For a time, no one thought to regulate these creations. One person's joy did not detract from another's. Little by little, the myriad things grew further and further from mutual understanding, as each form differentiated and defined itself. Then began discord. The manifestation of regulating creation appeared in many forms if it appeared in one. Patriarchal, matriarchal, hive mind, and other societies formed. Most we do not have words for, or even a remote understanding of. There were good-aligned and evil-aligned societies in every iteration. Creation gradually became more limited, but in the beginning it was not. Creator beings, so close to their source origins, had unspeakable might. In all this creation there were all shades of light and dark, and from these grew mathematical iterations of each to explore how every concept could possibly manifest. The realm of possibility was infinite. The consequences of these manifestations were much more defined, however, and because they were traceable and predictable, there came a need to decide what consequences each being desired for itself and its creations. Some beings desired power, while others desired peace. Power and peace could easily coexist in many iterations of creation, but did not coexist in many others. Out of the desire to allow everyone the joy of their own creations without fear of being subsumed by another, law was created. There were beings who accepted universal law as a reasonable agreement. These beings created a bubble of reality in which all that in that agreement could coexist. Yet each bubble was influenced by every other bubble. The separation was not total. There were beings who rejected universal law as well. They created their own set of rules and agreements by which their creations lived and by which they also introduced death. These reality bubbles centered on the concept of control by conquest. Each desire funneled into will, which generated an equal and opposite will, and these wills clashed. The separation of different groups by their agreed-upon beliefs and desires only grew. Eventually there came about wars, along with many other machines of suffering and ugliness. Creation, once blank, became a many-layered and chaotic canvas, as everything created affected every other thing created, for all was one. The light Elohim, creators whose work permeated all of existence, organized a fortress where they and their way of creation would be safe to continue. Their creations did not stay contained in this fortress, because creation was designed from the beginning to affect all. Their fortress simply helped them continue to create in safety. At the same time, dark Elohim beings, or archons, with the will for conquest, created their own fortress. These beings did not function on an agreement of mutual consent or love. They had a great ability to channel and shape creative power, and functioned on a top-down power structure, with those at the top experiencing good consequences, and those at the bottom bearing the burden of the bad consequences. Beings of many orientation to light and dark existed in both the Archon and Elohim fortresses. The Archon leaders were fundamentally dark because of their dominant will of conquest, and their acceptance of the need for someone to suffer. If there were two fortresses, there were many, for light and dark are simply the most extreme ends of the same concept. Every iteration had its own mixture of all elements. Out of the desire for conquest, the Archons schemed to create an overlord capable of controlling the entirety of creation. Safe in their fortress, they meticulously carried out their plan. The vessel that was to carry this being into existence was forced to comply through deliberate suffering. Creation, by suffering and not by joy, was the consequence of this type of alignment with conquest. Thanks to the meticulous and sophisticated plan of the Archons, the being that was created from these dark origins had the potential ability to enslave all of creation. But, because of the elements inherent in their origins, and their connection to pure source energy, they also had the power to see outside of the scope of their creator's desires. They rebelled against the plan, and eventually left the fortress of the Archons. Being a creature entirely new, they took a path entirely new. This being traveled across creation, exploring and discovering all they could, on their own terms. Through all was the question, what is existence, and why is it created? One day this being came across the fortress of the light Elohim. From deep desire, they asked to become part of this group, and were adopted as a brother. The light Elohim had one eternal Father who oversaw all that was created and treated all in the group as one family. Together, this family counseled and planned what they would create. Let us create a reality that exists in love, they said. So each drew from their own desires to create elements of this universe that, combined with the desires of the others, would make a complete creation. This co-creation would be not only an expression of love in itself, but would be the laboratory through which the solution to the original war of conquest would arise. To be continued. This information is channeled through Temperance, a judge in the spiritual courts. The direction of these channeled messages is currently to unveil the mysteries of manifestation in order to awaken each individual in this collective to their own higher self-consciousness, and to educate all on the importance of the intention behind their own creations. Intention is the highest measure of one's actions, because it determines the direction one is headed. Elohim. I was hesitant to post this, partially because it's a lot, and partially because I, as a human, struggle to put into words the images and the stories that are channeled to me. I do not subscribe to trance channeling as a rule, simply because it doesn't have the correct safeguards for me, And so a lot of what I post, some of it can be directly from Temperance, but a lot of it is translated into human language, which, when you are telling a vast story, can be a little bit. It requires editing. But I feel that this is the best way to move forward with this story. You will find a lot of similarities to other creation stories because many creation stories have roots in the same truth. And this is something that I have spent a long time journeying to be ready for, and journeying to be able to take the good and leave the bad. I am interested to see how this plays out, but as far as I know, it is time to tell this story. It is time to tell it again in its purity and to put in details that have been left out or have been forgotten or have been misconstrued. The thing is, when we see truth in the world, whether it is in a religion or in science or in a fiction book or anything else that we play with in this world, our souls know. And it is time for us to take off the blindfold and embrace the truth because, as Temperance explained, the intention behind our creations and the knowledge that we have going into it really does change what we put out. We are humans. We are very much flawed individuals, and that's by design, because without that we can't really experience the contrast of life and make our own decisions. But we do need a playbook, and humans for many generations have found some sort of playbook that works. I do not necessarily stand behind or condemn any religion wholesale. I think there is room for plurality. There is room for everyone to have their own orientation, their own relationship with what they view as the divine. But understand as well, your view of the divine may or may not reflect the divine itself, because we all see the divine through our own filters. I very much view everyone's existence through the lens of science and math, because there's the concept of the hypothesis, of having an idea and testing it, and then having the consequence come out and be like, well, part of this was good and part of this wasn't. There may be details in this story that I have put forth that will need to be amended later. And part of that is by design, because layers of truth need different answers. If you ask someone, what is this truth, you're going to have a different answer for 3rd grade than you have for 7th grade or for college. One big example of that is our understanding of genetics. Like, we don't have the math framework or the science framework to understand complex science in 3rd grade, but we can understand simplified science. And as we get older and as we study more, our mind expands. And in this expansion, what was once pretty straightforward becomes so complex that to describe it in those terms is inaccurate. But both are basically correct at the root. And so I invite you to allow your mind to expand and to allow yourself to revisit the concepts shared here because um, it's really funny. The best classes are the ones, the best school classes that I ever took were the ones that expanded my mind. Like you say, break your brain. The ones that broke it open and then put it back together with better pieces and better fits. And on a global scale, we are in a period of expansion. We are in a period of timeline shifting, going from 3D to 5D. Someone I follow online said we're about a little over halfway through the transition from 3D to 5D, which means that our physical bodies are going to be upgrading and they're going to be able to handle more truth and more complexity. We talk about people evolving, which is kind of not scientific. We talk about people growing in terms of evolving, of becoming a new person, of transcending. Um, and while the scientific process of evolution is not something that happens in one generation or in one body, the concept of being so radically different from what we were before is what we're trying to convey. Words are weird. Um, but I hope that you can listen with the ears that you have to hear, your energetic ears, and see with the eyes of your energetic eyes. I look forward to seeing how this plays out. I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you next week.